Hi, I'm Darla. At 19, I stood on the porch with a garbage bag in one hand and my mother's words in the other. You're nothing. You were born to fail. They didn't even look back as the door shut behind me. 9 years later, I bought the company they built their entire lives around, and now they sit in my lobby, whispering, please, but tell me, does every parent deserve a second chance? Even the ones who bet against their own child. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this, and where? Drop a comment below. You're not alone in this. I pulled my hood tighter as the rain picked up, soaking through the paper grocery bags cradled against my chest. One bag started to sag from the bottom, and I quickened my steps, my shoes sloshing through shallow puddles on the cracked sidewalk. It was only 6:15 p.m., but in late October, the Oregon sky was already painted dark. The porch light on our little one-story house stayed off. Again. I paused at the gate, shifting the weight of the bags, and stared at the door. No flicker of movement inside, no familiar clatter from the kitchen, just stillness. For a moment, I imagined opening the door to the smell of something warm, maybe my mother finally trying out that soup recipe I left on the fridge. Maybe tonight would be the night she asked about my midterms or the part-time offer at the bookstore for full-time hours. Maybe, but I knew better than to expect anything. I pushed the gate open. It creaked, a sound I had mentioned to Dad a dozen times, but he never oiled it. Climbing the steps to the porch, I shifted the bags and fumbled for my key. It didn't fit. I paused, turned it, tried again. Nothing. Then the deadbolt clicked from the other side. The door opened just a sliver, and through it, my mother's face appeared, expression flat, mouth tight. She didn't look at my eyes, just my wet hair, my sweater clinging to my frame, the torn bag. You're not staying here tonight, she said. No greeting, no question. What? My voice cracked from the cold. She shoved something into my chest. I barely caught it. My duffel bag, packed, sloppily, the zipper halfway open, one of my shoes hanging out, my toothbrush taped to the side with duct tape. Behind her, I saw him, my father, standing by the hallway light switch, not moving, not blinking, just there, like a statue that used to be a person. Wait, what's going on? I asked, heart pounding now, groceries forgotten and soaking by my feet. You were born to fail, Darla, she said, eyes cold like river rock. You've always been a drain. This is the end of it. What? What did I do? I stepped forward and she stepped back. Go find somewhere else to ruin, she said, and the door slammed. I stood on the porch for a full minute, hoping maybe my dad would open it. Maybe he'd say this was a mistake, that I misunderstood, but the porch light stayed off. The deadbolt clicked again, and the silence after. It wasn't angry, it wasn't dramatic, it was total, final. I picked up my bags, not even noticing the apple rolling from the broken paper sack onto the wet wood. The grocery bag tore completely and dropped a box of pasta into a puddle. I didn't pick it up. I just walked. The street was mostly empty, save for a few porch lights flickering in the distance. I turned right, not because I knew where I was going, but because left would have taken me past the McAllister house, where their daughter just got engaged and they always asked when I'd start making something of myself. The rain eased up to a drizzle. My fingers were freezing. Halfway down Birch Street, I passed Mrs. Lemieux's house. Her living room light was on. Through the blinds, I saw her watching TV with a bowl of popcorn. She looked up for half a second, made eye contact, and then pulled the string, letting the blinds fall shut. I pulled out my phone. No new messages. I called Tasha, my classmate who once said I could crash if I ever needed to. Voicemail. I tried Mia from work. Voicemail. For a moment, I just stood there. Then I started walking again, faster this time, toward the bookstore. By the time I reached the back alley entrance, my fingers were shaking so badly I could barely type the code. It was past closing, but Reggie, the night manager, was just locking up. He took one look at me and sighed. You okay? I nodded too fast. He looked down at my duffel bag, the ruined groceries, then back up at my face. You need the stockroom? I opened my mouth to explain. Couldn't. He nodded, pulled out his keys. Just tonight, he mumbled. Don't make a habit. I gave a weak smile. Thanks, Reggie. The stockroom was cold and smelled like cardboard, but it had a space heater in the corner and a stack of old coats near the lost and found bin. I laid my bag down, took off my wet sweater, and wrapped myself in two mismatched jackets. As I sat against the wall, knees pulled to my chest, I unclipped a tiny enamel apple pin from the collar of my sweater. I turned it over in my palm. Mrs. Hayworth had given it to me in 3rd grade. "You're bright," she said, "even if no one says it out loud." I stared at the little apple. "You were wrong too," I whispered. "Weren't you?" I didn't cry. There weren't any tears left, just this hollow ache where my chest used to be. And then, in the dark silence of the stockroom, I said it aloud, not to anyone, not even to myself, really. They said I'd fail, but they forgot something. I clenched the pin in my fist. I remember everything. 2 weeks had passed, but I could still feel the weight of that night pressing on my chest like it just happened. My clothes had stopped smelling like home days ago, and maybe that was a mercy. I'd been sleeping on a creaky cot in the laundry nook of Miss Reenie's trailer. She was the church janitor, and her daughter, Tanya, had offered me the space without much talk. They didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. It was safer that way. The days blurred together. Early mornings spent scrubbing toilets in the church basement, afternoons quietly shelving used paperbacks in the dusty corners of the community library, and evenings waiting for Tanya to finish her shift at the local diner so we could split whatever leftovers she smuggled home. But that afternoon, I made my way to the community center food pantry line for the first time. My stomach had been empty for a day and a half, and pride was no longer a luxury I could afford. The line wrapped around the block. Seniors, single moms, folks I'd seen at Sunday service since I was 6. I kept my head down and pulled my hoodie tighter around my face. The line shuffled forward, inch by inch. The cold was different now, not just in the air, but in how people looked through me, like I was a smudge no one wanted to acknowledge. "Darla Whitmore?" A voice came from behind me. Feminine, sharp, familiar. I turned slowly. Mrs. Hardesty. She used to teach Sunday school with my mother, made casseroles for church potlucks, once gave me a Bible with my name embroidered on the cover when I turned 12. Her eyes scanned me, and what she saw clearly disappointed her. "You should be ashamed," she said under her breath. "Running off like that, with that boy." I blinked. "What boy?" She huffed. "You know exactly who. And to do that to your poor mother, after all she gave up to raise you." I wanted to speak, wanted to shout, but my throat had dried up like the ground in August. I just stood there, numb, as she stepped ahead in line like she hadn't just crushed the air from my lungs. Apparently, they rewrote the story before I even had a chance to speak. After I grabbed the paper bag of canned beans and off-brand cereal, I walked toward the small patch of park across from the center. I sat on the cold bench and unpacked the bag slowly, like it might make things feel more real. The weight of someone else's lie settled heavier than the groceries in my lap. I thought about walking back to the trailer, curling up under the mismatched blankets Tanya gave me, and shutting out the world, but I didn't. Instead, I made my way to the library. It was quiet inside, like always. I headed toward the back where the fiction stacks ended and the old magazines began. I didn't go there to read. I went there to feel something normal, even if it was just fluorescent lights and that faint smell of musty paper. 2 women were shelving books nearby. Both wore blue volunteer aprons with their names stitched in cursive, Bonnie and Marlene. Bonnie held up a parenting book and chuckled. "Some girls just can't be helped. Go wild, run off, then expect everyone else to clean up their mess." Marlene shook her head. "That Whitmore girl, she was always odd. Her mama tried her best, I suppose." I stood frozen behind the bookshelf. My fingers clenched around the book in my hand so hard the pages bent. They weren't just talking about a generic girl. They were talking about me. No one asked me what happened. No one thought maybe there was more to the story. They just filled in the blanks with whatever made them feel better. My own parents painted me as some love-struck girl who ran off with a boy. No need to explain. No need to take responsibility. As I walked out of the library, the pain didn't rise like a wave. It seeped, slow and cold, like water under a locked door. I found myself wandering again, unsure where to go, until I ended up at the edge of the park. There, on a cracked wooden bench, I sat down and reached into my coat pocket. $20. The last of what I'd hidden when I left. I held it in my hand like it was supposed to mean something. Then I ripped it, piece by piece. I watched as each fragment floated to the ground like brittle leaves. Maybe it was stupid. But in that moment, it felt like the only choice I still had. If the world already believed I was reckless, why not be reckless on my own terms? The sky turned from pale blue to a heavy gray, and the chill deepened. I stood up, brushed off my jeans, and walked toward the church. Miss Reaney didn't ask questions when I stepped through the side door. I found the mop bucket in the back closet, filled it, and went to the basement bathrooms. I scrubbed floors, wiped sinks, washed away other people's messes until the air stung with bleach and my arms ached. And for a moment, I felt like I had control of at least one thing, cleaning something until it was new again. When I finished, I sat on the tiled floor and leaned against the wall. "Let them tell whatever story they need to," I whispered. "I'll write my own ending." By morning, I had made up my mind. There was a small flyer on the corkboard in the church hallway. Late GED course starting next week at the Adult Learning Center. And I took it down and folded it into my back pocket. A week later, I stood in the cramped registrar's office of the Learning Center, hands tucked into the sleeves of my second-hand hoodie. "Address?" the woman behind the desk asked. I hesitated. "Just a mailing address for class communication," she clarified, eyes still on her screen. I gave her a name of a street 2 blocks from the diner where Tanya worked. I didn't know the house number. I made one up. She didn't blink. After filling out the form, I stepped outside. The afternoon light bounced off the pavement, and the wind kicked up dust from the sidewalk. As I turned the corner, someone passed me on the sidewalk. Mrs. Kessler, my old neighbor. She used to give me strawberry jam jars at Christmas and wave when she drove by. She walked right past me, didn't stop, didn't blink, didn't see me. And oddly enough, that didn't sting. It felt like a layer of skin had peeled off. Something old, something expected. Like I'd shed the version of me they thought they knew. She looked right through me. And maybe that's what saved me. The night air felt like pins pressing through my sleeves as I stepped off the bus. My fingers were still wet from the church kitchen sink, where I'd spent the past 4 hours elbow-deep in greasy dishwater. I could still hear the scrape of metal trays, the echo of voices I didn't know. She looked right through me. And maybe that's what saved me. That thought had lingered like breath on cold glass. Being invisible had its uses. But what no one tells you is, ghosts don't vanish. Some just start collecting mail in your name. I dropped my bag beside a folding chair in the church's shared basement shelter. One fluorescent light buzzed above, casting a dull blue across the rows of sleeping mats. I reached for the old laptop I kept in a locked bin, a donation from a retired schoolteacher who'd whispered, "Get back up, honey," as she handed it to me. I opened it on my knees, squinting at the cracked screen, trying to memorize the chapters for my upcoming GED exam. The words blurred, my hands, still chapped from detergent, trembled over the keyboard. I clicked my email, and that's when I saw it. Subject, delinquent account notification. I blinked, once, twice. What account? I hadn't bought so much as a candy bar on credit in 6 months. I clicked, and in black and white, amount past due. $638.21. Loan, amount, $7,500. Business equipment, lease. Cosigner, Darla Marin. SSN ending in 9307. My chest tightened. I reread the email twice, then sat motionless, the din of the shelter falling away. They didn't just kick me out. They signed my name before they shut the door. I slipped my coat back on and walked 2 blocks in silence to the all-night gas station. They let me borrow their landline sometimes. I gave the credit agency my name, birth date, social security number. The woman on the phone had a kind voice. She asked me if I remembered co-signing anything. "No," I said. "Well," she replied gently, "the application came from redacted drive, matches your file. It's from 6 months ago." 6 months ago was 2 weeks before my mother packed my things in a lawn bag and told me, "You're an embarrassment." I gripped the receiver so hard my hand hurt. "Who signed it?" She paused. "It's your name. Signature matches your ID." Of course it did. I used to help with bills. They had photocopies of everything. After I hung up, I stood under the gas station awning. Wind whipped my hair into my mouth, but I didn't move. I was 23, homeless, working double shifts for coffee tips. And now, apparently also a co-signer for a loan I never saw. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I walked back toward the shelter. I didn't even feel the gravel beneath my soles. I climbed onto my mat, pulled the journal from beneath my pillow, and wrote in the margin of an old church bulletin. They thought I'd never look up. Joke's on them. I never looked down. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I couldn't afford to stay buried under shame. After a rushed shower in the shared stall and a paper cup of black coffee from the church lobby, I caught the first city bus and headed toward the community college. My breath fogged the glass, and I watched the frost-covered sidewalks glide by. At the career services desk, I filled out a clipboard form that asked if I was seeking opportunities for re-entry. I checked yes, twice. A woman with pressed gray curls and a navy cardigan called my name. She introduced herself as Ms. Langley. No nonsense, no small talk. Just raised eyebrows and a steady gaze. I handed her my forms. She flipped through them, then looked up. "You trying to crawl or climb?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" She leaned back. "Your parents put you in a hole. I see it all the time. But what matters now is, are you trying to make a nest in there? Or are you ready to claw your way out?" I didn't smile, just nodded. "I'm done being quiet." Her eyes softened, but her voice didn't. "Then let's get loud, baby." She walked me through 3 grant programs, 2 local, 1 state-funded. I scribbled every detail like it was gospel. Then she leaned in, her voice dropping. "There's a tech startup training cohort, pilot program, GED students only, full ride, housing, stipend, career track." I didn't breathe. She added, "But there's 1 slot left, and they're interviewing tomorrow morning. You interested?" I swallowed, slow. "What time?" 9 o'clock sharp. "In Portland. I'll help get you there, but you better bring your fire, girl. They don't take pity. They take potential." I stood, heart hammering. "I'll be there." As I walked out of her office, papers tucked under my arm like armor, I passed a woman walking in, one of my mother's old bridge club friends. She glanced at me, then kept walking, didn't blink, didn't recognize me. And for the first time, I was glad. Maybe she didn't see me, but I did. There was 1 slot left, and the interview was tomorrow morning. I didn't sleep. Even with the shelter's heat turned up, my body stayed curled into itself like a question. I clutched my backpack the entire night, not from fear, but because it carried everything: my documents, my GED scores, my resume, and the 1 clean shirt I had left. I ironed it with the back of a pan over the shelter's kitchenette stove, folded it flat between 2 books, and laid it under my mattress. It wasn't perfect, but it looked like I gave a damn, and I did. By 5:40 a.m., I was out the door, walking briskly to the MAX station through streets still slick with frozen mist. My shoes, canvas, secondhand, were soaked through before the bus even arrived. Each step made a quiet squish, but I kept going. Portland looked different. The streets buzzed with tech shuttles, scooters, and professionals holding lattes in sleek gloves. As I stepped off the bus near the warehouse district, my breath caught on itself. The building was enormous. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, steel-beamed signage reading, "Foundry Tech Start." I froze. It looked like something out of a commercial. I glanced down at my clothes, then at the polished glass doors. I muttered to myself, "You don't belong here. They'll see it." A man in a puffer vest walked past me, holding a tablet in one hand and a matcha latte in the other. He didn't even glance my way. I swallowed. Tomorrow is now today. And today could change everything. Inside, the front desk attendant smiled, maybe because he had to. He handed me a temporary badge. Darla Whitmore. Interview, 9 a.m. Tech cohort. B. The interview room sat at the end of a long, quiet hallway that smelled like pine wood and lemon sanitizer. There were 3 people waiting, a middle-aged woman in a cobalt suit, a younger man with tightly styled hair, and an older man whose eyes tracked every step I took. I sat down, tried not to fidget. My palms were damp, my mouth dry. Miss Whitmore, the woman began, we've reviewed your application. You come highly recommended by Mrs. Langley. Can you tell us why you believe you're a good fit? I cleared my throat. Because I've failed before. And I got up. They waited. I continued. I dropped out. Not because I was lazy, but because life hit hard. I've worked night shifts, cleaned houses, waited tables, and studied in between. I know how to work through fatigue. I don't think tech needs more perfection. I think it needs people who don't give up. The younger man scribbled something. The woman nodded once. The older man, though, he hadn't taken his eyes off me. His stare wasn't cold. It wasn't exactly kind, either. It was calculating. A few more questions passed, about problem solving, about community engagement, about adapting to fast-paced environments. I answered the best I could, holding my voice steady. Then the older man leaned forward, fingertips pressed together. You're Darla Whitmore? I nodded slowly. Your father? Alan Whitmore? My breath locked up. Yes, I said, quietly, carefully. He exhaled, his expression unreadable. I thought so. Silence. The woman looked between us. Is there a problem, Mr. Connors? No, he said, still studying me. No problem, just a memory. He leaned back. Your father laid me off 6 years ago. I was a foreman at Whitmore Manufacturing, 21 years there. One Friday, he called 6 of us into the office, said times were tough, no severance, no warning. My skin burned. I opened my mouth to apologize, though it wasn't mine to give, but he raised a hand. Don't. That man had nothing to do with who you are now. I've been reading your posts on the GED forum. Didn't realize it was that Darla Whitmore. He smiled then, not cruelly, just surprised. You wrote something, he said, a line about rebuilding from scraps, said, I didn't get a second chance, I made one. That stuck with me. I didn't know what to say. I'd posted that one night from a diner's break room. I never thought anyone read those. He turned to the others. I say we stop the interview here. My stomach dropped, but then he added, she deserves this seat more than anyone. They looked at him. I've watched 10 years of interns come and go, Connors continued. Degrees from Stanford, MIT, kids who never worked a shift in their lives. This one? He looked back at me. She knows something none of them do. The room held still. Then the woman nodded. The younger man shrugged, impressed. Congratulations, she said. You're in. My ears rang. I stood up slowly, remembering to breathe. Thank you, I said. My voice cracked, but I didn't hide it. Thank you for seeing me. Outside, Portland felt warmer, even with the wind. I walked back toward the bus stop, a thin slip of paper clutched in my hand, confirmation, acceptance, a second chance, carved by my own calloused hands. The sidewalk teemed with noise, footsteps, laughter, life. I stood still for a second, letting it all rush around me. Not bad, I whispered to myself, for someone born to fail. But failure isn't what follows me now. Silence is, not a peaceful kind. No, this one lingers in the hallways when you come home to no one. It wraps itself around your shoulders even when you're winning. Especially then. It's been 9 months since that day in the warehouse district, when I walked out with my name on a scholarship letter and my chest burning with disbelief. Since then, I've worked every daylight hour, and some of the moonlit ones too. Coding. Testing. Failing. Fixing. Learning to build again, with keystrokes and persistence instead of drywall and duct tape. This morning, I hit a quiet milestone. I completed my first paid freelance project. It was nothing fancy, a mobile scheduling app for a local plumbing business, but it worked. And when I clicked submit, my name showed up in the project credits online. Darla Whitmore, Junior Developer. 6 words that shouldn't mean so much, but they do. I stared at that page longer than I should have, sipping the last of my lukewarm gas station coffee and pretending I didn't care. Then I opened another tab, typed my name into Google, and waited. Nothing. A few dead Facebook links, one outdated church bulletin from over 6 years ago. But no mention of Whitmore the dropout. No story of the daughter who disappeared. Which, in a way, made sense. They never wanted the world to remember me. That night, I curled up in my second-hand couch under a blanket I bought from a thrift shop 2 winters ago. Laptop on my knees, soft jazz playing low from the speakers. Just another quiet evening in a small apartment that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old paper. Then came the ping. An email from the training program's coordinator. Subject: Congratulations. Body: Darla, congrats again on your first published app. By the way, check out this article in PDX Tech Life. They picked you for their Rising Stars feature, link below. I blinked, clicked, and there it was, a full article, my name, my photo, blurry, clearly taken from our graduation event last month. Headline: GED to GitHub, Portland's own Darla Whitmore codes her comeback. It felt strange, like seeing someone else's life with your face on it. I skimmed the paragraphs, mentions of my late start, the program, the project. They called me resilient, tenacious, even inspirational. And then I closed the tab. I didn't forward it, didn't save it, just shut the laptop and sat still while the room returned to its usual hush. But across the state, in a weathered 2-story home off Route 19, that silence cracked. A neighbor, Mrs. Kellen, the one who used to water our begonias when we vacationed in Florida, had seen the article. She forwarded it to my mother, who apparently still used the AOL email address she'd had since dial-up. According to my cousin Mia, who texted me the same night, the news traveled fast. Hey, just so you know, your mom posted this on Facebook. Screenshot. So proud of how far our daughter has come. She's always been brilliant. I stared at those words. Read them again. Daughter, that was new. When I left, they called me a burden, a bad influence on my siblings. Ungrateful. Embarrassing. I wasn't their daughter then. I didn't respond to Mia. I didn't message my mother. Didn't click like. Instead, I pulled out the worn leather notebook I kept in the drawer by my bed, the one I wrote in when I needed to remind myself what was real. And I wrote, funny. They never called me daughter, until someone else called me valuable. I closed the journal, let the sentence hang in the air like an unsent letter. The next few days passed in steady rhythm, mornings at the software incubator where I now worked part-time, afternoons filled with freelance debugging, evenings filled with cheap pasta and design mock-ups. I avoided social media, ignored the random, hey girl, been ages, messages from high school classmates who never noticed I'd vanished. The world had noticed me, but not the parts I wanted. Then came the knock. No one ever knocks. Not in this building. You buzz, or you text. I had just returned from the grocery store. Set the canvas bags down on the kitchen counter, hung up my raincoat. Steam from the stove was starting to rise from a boiling pot of rice, and then a soft, single knock. Not urgent, not friendly, just placed. I walked to the door, hand tightening around the handle without turning it. I didn't open it. Not yet. I looked through the peephole, no one. I cracked the door anyway, and saw it, an envelope, yellowed at the edges, taped to the door with masking tape, my name written across the front in rough, slanted strokes I hadn't seen in years. Dad's handwriting. I peeled it from the door with fingers I didn't realize were shaking, brought it inside, sat at the table, opened it. There was no card, no apology, no contact info, just a torn piece of lined paper, folded once. 2 words, we need you. That's the thing about people who once erased you. When they bring out a pen again, you check the ink. I held the note in my hand longer than I should have, not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. We need you. 3 words from a man who hadn't said mine in 6 years. 2 days later, I was sitting alone at the far end of a quiet cafe, tucked between a laundromat and a vape shop off 23rd. I chose the seat on purpose, back to the wall, eyes on the door, like I used to do when I slept rough. Old habits don't disappear, they just go quiet. My coffee was lukewarm. I hadn't touched it. The steam had long stopped rising, but my hands stayed wrapped around the cup, fingers tight like I needed something to anchor me. The bell over the cafe door jingled. I didn't need to look. I felt it. My mother came in first. She wore a navy blazer 2 decades too old, and shoes with scuffed tips that reminded me of how she used to tap her foot at my report cards. Her face looked thinner than I remembered. She scanned the cafe and spotted me, hesitating a half-second too long. Then came my father, bigger than life once, now with rounded shoulders and a salt and pepper beard that didn't suit him. He walked like someone who wasn't sure if he'd be welcomed or thrown out. I didn't stand, didn't smile. They sat across from me like we were 3 strangers who'd been told to share a table. I let the silence sit. Then I asked flatly, "Why now?" My father opened his mouth first. "We thought about reaching out earlier, but..." "But what?" I interrupted. "The timing wasn't desperate enough?" They blinked at that. He cleared his throat, adjusting his posture like that might make the truth easier to say. "Whitmore Manufacturing is struggling. Of course, the legacy, the only child they never failed to mention at dinner." He went on. "We lost our main contract. The bank is circling. Loans are defaulting. We've had to let over 100 people go in the last quarter." I kept my eyes on his. "And?" He hesitated. My mother filled the silence. "We heard you were doing something in tech. Something with startups?" I gave the smallest nod. Let her squirm in the vagueness. Her voice softened, practiced, polished. "You've always been so clever." "Maybe now's the time to..." "To what?" I cut in again. "To be useful. To finally matter because I have something you want." "What?" My father's mouth tightened. "That's not fair. Neither was leaving your daughter sleeping in a basement pew while you told the neighborhood I'd taken time to find myself." That shut them up. For a moment, the clinking of silverware from the kitchen behind us filled the space where honesty should have been. I leaned forward. "You want help? Say my name." My mother's lips twitched. "Darla." I waited. "No. Say it right." She looked to him like a child asking permission. His jaw clenched, then slowly loosened. He said it quietly. "Darla Whitmore, the woman we abandoned, the woman who rose." I let the words hang. It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. He reached into a leather folder and pulled out a printed business proposal. Company letterhead still bold at the top. I didn't touch it, just stared at the page like it was someone else's story. "We don't have time," he said. "We need capital, connections. Someone who can help pivot to automation. You're the only one we know in that world." I finally picked it up, flipped through, charts, projections, desperation. They had even listed my name, without permission, as a potential consultant. Like it was already settled. I slid the folder back across the table. "I'll think about it," I said, standing slowly. "But not for you. For the workers you failed." My mother opened her mouth, maybe to protest or soften the moment. I didn't give her the chance. I turned, walked out the cafe door, and let it close behind me like a gavel falling. On the sidewalk, I took a breath. There was no wind, but I could still feel the ashes starting to shift. "I'll think about it," I said. But the truth? I already knew the answer. The answer wasn't yes. It was something better, permanent. 2 months passed. I didn't call them back, didn't send a follow-up, no emails, no polite decline, just silence. But behind that silence, I was moving faster than I ever had. Mornings started early at the co-working loft I rented downtown, coffee in one hand, tablet in the other. A view of Portland's skyline stretching through the fogged glass as I dissected Whitmore Manufacturing's latest quarterly disclosures line by line. Their foundation had cracks running through every wall, too many legacy contracts, bloated payrolls, and a blind dependence on one supplier in Ohio who'd already gone belly up. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. This wasn't revenge. This was precision. "You're really doing this?" my friend Cal asked one afternoon, leaning against the frame of the glass conference room. He worked in private equity, a world where silence was currency and power changed hands in handshakes no one saw. "I'm not helping them," I said, flipping to another file. "I'm buying them." He raised a brow. "That's not a rescue." "No," I said flat. "It's ownership." We started with a Shell LLC. Clean name, no public links to me. I brought in an investor I'd met during my fellowship, a woman who understood exactly what it meant to stay invisible until you owned the table. She liked my plan, loved the numbers. We bought in pieces, a few percentages here, a few there. The shares were divided enough that no one noticed, just another anonymous holding company in a tired industry trying to stay afloat. Week 4, I got a call. One of the board members, the same man who once told me I lacked presence, needed to unload 11%. Divorce settlement. He was desperate, short-sighted, and sloppy with paperwork. He never even asked who was really behind the offer. By week 7, the balance shifted. I remember staring at the updated chart, my name still hidden behind a corporate veil, but there it was, controlling interest, majority vote, full influence, Whitmore, in all but name. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer. I took a slow breath and booked a flight back to Ashridge. The quarterly shareholders meeting was scheduled for a crisp Thursday morning. I wore charcoal gray, tailored, restrained, hair pinned up, no jewelry except my grandmother's watch, the one piece they hadn't pawned off when things started sinking. When I stepped into the boardroom, I noticed the smell first, stale coffee and ambition. The table was already half full. My father sat at the head, flipping through his notes like a man still convinced he was in charge. My mother sat beside him, chin high, fingers laced together like prayer and control. They didn't notice me at first. Then someone cleared their throat. Representing the new controlling interest in Whitmore Manufacturing, Ms. Darla Whitmore. You could have heard a pin drop. My father's head jerked up, color draining. My mother stared, eyes wide. Someone muttered, "You're kidding." I pulled out the empty chair across from them and sat down. Calm. Clean. Silent. "This is some kind of joke," my father said, trying to stand. His voice cracked just a little. "No," I replied. "No tricks. Just business. Just what you taught me. Mayim." He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. I didn't blink. "To the board," I said evenly. "Effective immediately. Leadership will shift. Per our bylaws, majority interest carries executive restructuring authority." My mother's voice finally broke through the room's quiet. "Why are you doing this, Darla?" I looked at her, not cold, but clear. "You fired me from your life. I'm just returning the favor." She flinched, like I'd hit her. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't even lean forward. Just facts. Just business. One of the junior legal reps read the motion to confirm the title transfer. A formality. A vote followed, swift and one-sided. My name went up on the ledger. Darla Whitmore, majority stakeholder. The room emptied quickly after that. Some offered stiff nods. A few avoided eye contact. One woman in marketing whispered as she passed, "We've been waiting for someone like you." I didn't know what that meant yet, but I would. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tighter and started down the steps. My phone buzzed in my pocket, half a dozen press inquiries already lighting up. And then, a voice behind a camera, small, curious. "Who are you to the Whitmores?" I stopped, glanced back just once. "I'm the one they called a nobody." Then I kept walking. Funny how quickly the word nobody fades when your name's on the deed. 3 weeks after the boardroom shook under my heels, my world looked nothing like the one I'd left behind. Mornings started at 6:30. By 8, I was already in the downtown office my startup had leased just off Pioneer Square. Glass walls, clean desks, the steady clack of keyboards, and the low hum of confidence. We didn't hang portraits here, no legacy photos of founders in mahogany frames. We built forward. I rarely spoke about the takeover. I let others do that for me, quietly. In whispers behind closed doors, In articles that never used my first name but always used unexpected, brilliant, or stone cold. My name sat on legal documents and strategy memos, not in headlines. I preferred it that way. Whitmore Manufacturing had become one of several operations I now oversaw remotely. Its restructuring was clinical, emotionless, like cleaning a wound too deep to feel. My team admired what they called my poise. But poise, I've learned, is what grows after your heart stops expecting apologies. That morning, I was in my office reviewing the updated vendor report from the Oregon plant. Nothing urgent, nothing broken, just decisions. My assistant, Chloe, knocked softly and peeked in with a strange tightness in her expression. "There are 2 visitors downstairs," she said. "They said they're your parents." I looked up. "They used that word, parents?" She hesitated. "They said they're here to apologize." It didn't feel like a moment. It didn't crash into me or split the air. It just settled in, like a slow fog curling under a doorframe. I set the tablet down and pushed my chair back. My heels tapped steadily on the polished floor as I walked out of my office and toward the mezzanine. From there, I could see the lobby below through the glass railing. They stood awkwardly in the center of the reception space, surrounded by clean lines and sharp edges that made them look like they didn't belong. My mother was wearing a coat I hadn't seen in years. My father's shoulders were slumped in a way I never thought possible. They didn't look defiant. They looked disassembled. I took the elevator down. The ride was silent, save for the low ding at each floor. I stepped out slowly, giving them time to notice me before I reached them. I didn't want surprise. I wanted clarity. My mother was the first to speak. Her voice cracked around the edges. "We were wrong," she said. "About you." "About everything." My father opened his mouth as if to add something, but only managed a dry cough. He tried again. He stopped. "We thought we were protecting the family, doing what was best for everyone. We didn't see what we were doing to you." My jaw tightened slightly. "You didn't see because you never looked." Behind me, I could feel eyes from the upper floor. My team watching. No one said a word. The silence had weight. It pressed down on every syllable that followed. My mother reached forward, hesitated, then let her hand fall. "We don't expect things to go back. We just thought maybe if you'd allow us, some small role, any part in the company, or your life." That's when I stepped back, just a bit. Enough to reclaim space, not to retreat. "When I needed a home," I said quietly, "you locked the door. Now that your house is burning, you want to come inside mine?" They both froze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the shaking I expected. There was just stillness in me. A cold, sure stillness that comes after the storm has passed and nothing's left but clean air and ash. Jobtim. My father looked at me like he wanted to fall, and then he did. Not performatively, not in anger or drama. He simply dropped to his knees like something in his body gave out. My mother followed, slower, as if it hurt more to bend than to break. I didn't rush to help them, because love doesn't mean losing yourself. And forgiveness? It doesn't come pre-packaged with access. I turned slightly and looked at Chloe, who had quietly stepped behind the desk again, waiting. "Please walk them out," I said, my voice calm. As they were led away, my mother turned to look at me one more time. Her eyes searched mine, but I didn't flinch. She mouthed something. I think it was please, but I didn't respond. When the lobby doors finally clicked shut behind them, I stood there for a moment, still and alone in the middle of the space. Then I whispered to no one, not even to myself, forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, and forgetting isn't required to move on. I whispered that to myself as I stepped out of the elevator into the new lobby, my lobby. The glass doors reflected the morning light across the polished floors of what used to be Whitmore Manufacturing, once soaked in outdated pride and old money arrogance. Now, it bore a new name, Havenworks. Gone were the portraits of founders who'd never imagined a woman like me running things. Gone were the walnut-paneled walls and silence that used to echo judgment down the hallways. Everything was brighter now, The scent of fresh paint still clung to the corners, mingling with the quiet whir of coffee machines and the soft hum of startup energy. "Morning, Darla," my assistant smiled, holding open the boardroom door. "They're all set for the ribbon cutting." I nodded, smoothing the crease of my sleeve as I walked in. The room wasn't packed with investors or reporters, no press, no cameras, just our team, engineers, administrators, community partners, people who had stood by me when the building's bones were crumbling and the name Whitmore still had teeth. And across the far wall, behind a modest satin cover, was the brass plaque we'd all voted on last month, a public promise to invest 10% of profits into technical mentorship for young women and veterans in the area. I didn't need a grand speech. I just cleared my throat and said, "You stayed when others ran. You saw potential when most saw salvage. Today, we make good on that faith. Thank you for helping turn survival into something worth growing." They clapped, short, sincere, and someone from the city council nodded toward the curtain. I walked over and pulled it back. The plaque read, "Havenworks Foundation. In honor of the builders, the believers, and the ones no one thought to bet on." My fingers rested there a second longer than they needed to. After the brief ceremony, I slipped away from the chatter and into my office. It had the same high ceilings and corner window view as it always did. But like everything else, it had been stripped and reborn, neutral tones, quiet textures. And in the far corner, beneath the window overlooking the Willamette River, stood a single, high-backed armchair in slate gray, untouched. I placed my hand on it as I walked past. It wasn't meant for guests, not for reading, not for me. Just there. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "For the girl who was told she would fail, may she always have a place." It wasn't a declaration. It was a promise, quiet and personal. For the 15-year-old who slept in her car behind a bowling alley. For the 23-year-old who signed contracts in cafes because no one would give her an office. For the woman who'd once knocked on her parents' door just to be told, "You made your choices." And 3 months ago, when those same parents had stood in my lobby, exhausted, fragile, asking for anything, I hadn't shouted, I hadn't slammed doors, I'd simply said, "Please walk them out." I hadn't seen them since. Behind my desk, I opened the top drawer. There it was, still unopened, a single envelope. My handwriting on the front, addressed to the home where I grew up but never belonged. Inside, I'd written the words weeks ago, never mailed them. "I don't hate you, but I've rebuilt enough not to need your love to breathe." I let it sit in my hand for a moment, then gently placed it back in the drawer and closed it. No ceremony, no flames, just peace. Later that afternoon, after the team filtered out and the light dipped golden across the skyline, I stayed behind. The building had grown quiet again, but this time, it didn't echo the way it used to. I walked to the window, sat at the desk, glanced at the empty chair in the corner. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had anything to prove. Not to them, not to the city, not even to myself. The phone rang once. I let it go to voicemail. Some people think revenge is fire, explosive, loud. But I've found the real power is being the one who walks away, still whole, still standing. I reached for my tea, took a long sip, and let the hum of the city wrap around me like a quiet coat of resilience. Do you think I was too cold? Or just finally warm enough to stop needing the fire?